So thank you for those who are here on time. We're going to get started. So on behalf of Jewish Unity Through Diversity, both Dalya and myself welcome you to our program today. We get a lot of questions about what different customs are and different celebrations, and we've done different celebrations in the past focusing on just one community and how they celebrate. And so we decided it might make sense to kind of share a little bit, see what we've come up with, see what you come up with to understand a little bit more some of the deeper background and history of the customs of Purim. And Purim's a fun one. So we thought we'd kind of spearhead this with the Purim. We hope to do a Pesach one as well. So we'd love to hear some feedback if you think you have some things about that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. I encourage you again, please, I encourage you to open your cameras, and we encourage you to share in the chat in the meantime. So let's start with the basics, right? So we know that Purim,
we don't see the screen.
You don't see the screen. Thank you. I moved it to the next one. Thank you, Dalya.
Now we see it. Okay.
Nice. Okay, let's try that again. So the basics. We know that there are four basic mitzvot, or if we don't know, now we know. There are four basic mitzvot for Purim that everybody shares as long as they've had this Purim story in their community. We know that there are some communities that just are coming to the Purim story because they left the land of Israel before it became a holiday. But those who stayed connected in some way throughout, we read Megillat Esther, we have Seudah, we have a feast, we do Mishloach Manot, we give gifts, we have Machatzit Shekel, and we do Matanot Le'Evyonim, which are charity for the poor. Sorry, we give something for the poor. So you have to give at least one thing to two people, one thing each to two people for the poor. So those are things that are across any community that you're going to be part of. And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page for this, because everything we're going to add in here are kind of extras and things that grew out of it, which is beautiful and wonderful. And that's one of the things we talk about, is how we can each learn from each other and grow from each other and understand what we can add and enhance our holidays. So in addition to that, one of the interesting things that I think came up in terms of Purim is Esther as a strong woman, Esther as part of our history. And the way you really see that as a continuation of the Purim story is within the crypto-Jewish community. So Bnei Anusim, crypto-Jews, what used to be known as Marranos, which we are careful not to say. So those are the Jews who, beginning in 1391, then in 1492, kind of either converted to Christianity completely and then kept something inside. And today they're coming out, and we see them coming out because they have something called Santa Esther. Interesting concept, we'll come back to it. But one of the things that we're focusing on are all these threads that are through the different communities, and even those that from 1391 or 1492 or 1497, depending on when they left the community, that there are things that they held on to. And we'll talk about those as we continue. Or not, because I can't go next. All right, here. So some of the uncommon practices that we have, we talked about the ones that we all had together. Some of the uncommon ones that we had are effigies. So if you look at some of the history of some of the communities around the world, they would create effigies of Haman, and they would burn him or break him as a piñata. We'll talk about, I'll get into the details. So let's start with the Gaonic period. So the Gaonim, which is basically in modern day Iraq, explained the custom of Mashbalta de Puria. And they said, the young lads make an effigy of Haman and hang it from the roofs for 4 or 5 days. Then on Purim, they make a bonfire and throw the effigy into it, and they dance around the fire and sing. They hang a ring over the fire and they jump through the ring from one side of the fire to the other. So we're talking about hundreds of years ago, this custom had come to be. Now, we know that it continued throughout in that region, and that's one of the things that are interesting, I think are interesting. I shouldn't say they're interesting, I think they are. For example, in the Ottoman lands, at schools, they would hang a sugar doll, like a doll made out of sugar in the shape of Haman, in the hallway. And each person would hit it as they walked through it, like a piñata, until it completely fell apart. And then all the kids would be able to come rush and quickly get a piece of the Haman that broke apart. We see it a little bit differently in Morocco. The children would make dummies or dolls mocking Haman, and then they'd all mock him throughout, and sometimes Haman's 10 sons as well. And they'd either hang them afterwards or burn them in a central place. So you see, it's the same kind of concept. Obviously not one of the core traditions that some of us may know, but it's grown out of it and it enhances it. So, for example, in the Balkans and Tunisia, effigies of the Purim personalities from the scroll of Esther were also distributed. And they, even in the as late as the 19th century, they elaborated on it with school teachers also creating this sugar effigy of Haman. So you see it's across many different places. Now, if you also look at the special foods, so in Israel, we have Oznei Haman, right? Haman's ears. We also see it in the crypto recipes. We see it, the crypto Jews had an ear recipe. And the Sephardic Brotherhood, so it talks about Olehas de Haman, Haman's ears, which is sweet dough balls fried in oil and drizzled with honey and syrup. It's formed in the shape of an ear, which actually the non-Jew Jewish communities have a very similar one there, but they call it elephant's ears. And those who have a more Yiddish background, we call it Hamantashen, or in the US, we say it's Haman's hat. So a lot of these foods vary based on where you are, but there are connecting parts of it. Another one, custom, so a third custom we're going to talk about, non-common practices in terms of the greater Jewish diasporas, is a special piyut called Mi Kamocha, who is like you. There is none like you. And it's composed by Rabbi Yehuda Levi, and it's sung on Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat preceding Purim, in most Sephardic and Mizrahi communities. Most of the piyut talks about the story of the book of Esther and praises God for his wonders. The piyut contains actually 4 chapters, and the first 3 chapters tell the story of the book of Esther using hundreds of fragments of verses and midrashic and Talmudic ideas, like you could pick up on them from without it. It's a beautiful concept. The last chapter opens with the commandments of the holidays of Purim, much as the last chapter of Megillat Esther, and moves on to describe the parting of the Red Sea and the singing of the sea. So here we see the words of it, and I want to go to it. Oh, sorry. I want you to at least hear some of it. Was open before. Okay, I will find it while Dalya's talking. Sorry, we did have that open, but we'll play it in the background afterwards. So let's go into, we did some of them that come and go across many different lands. Now let's focus in on some that are specific to different diasporas. So I'm going to hand it over to Dalya.
So we're going to go across a couple of specific lands that we chose, but for this image you see, for those who know, for those who don't know, it's an early 3rd century Roman painting of Esther and Mordechai from the Dura Europos synagogue in Syria. So we're talking 3rd century CE, very ancient in Syria, celebrating Purim. So that's just a jumpstart into our many lands where they celebrate it in many different ways. And we'll start with the crypto experience, because as we said, there is something in this story of Queen Esther that can be related to the crypto Jews. She hid her faith, but still obviously maintained her identity, because when the moment came and she needed to save her people, she knew who she was and what she needed to do. So crypto Jews would hold actually a 3-day fast before Purim. And most communities hold only 1 day of a fast, but according to the scroll of Esther, she held a 3-day fast in order to prepare herself for meeting with the king and trying to save her people. So they held on to that tradition, which is based in the text. And some of the other things that they held on to based on the text was, let's say, they ate vegetarian. Part of the idea that Esther was in a foreign court, and she was trying to maintain her identity as a Jew. Their tradition holds that she didn't eat meat so that she would be able to keep by the laws of kashrut, to be kosher. So they would have a vegetarian meal. Specifically, Ronit Treatment in the Times of Israel talks about, she brings in an Inquisition document from Mallorca, where, should I continue?
Yes, continue. I'm just
Okay. From Mallorca, where one Ana Cortez voluntarily tells the court that her father Joseph had taught her about the observance of the 3-day fast of Esther, and they would commemorate it at the beginning of Lent, which is about the time of Purim. And her Purim meal that she mentions consists of chickpeas, spinach, and hearts of palm stew, which is a dish that would be consumed by the poor Christians for Lent. It's also vegetarian, so it holds to that tradition. And that was, aside from the years that we mentioned, that was their food connection to Purim. And as previously mentioned, there was Santa Esterica, which there was basically Purim turned into the day of Santa Esterica. And it's still a day that is celebrated across Spain, Portugal, Italy, and the New World. And if you go to the next slide, then you can see these are two compositions, because essentially when the Catholic Church formally recognizes someone as a saint, that person is canonized. But there's also an opportunity for those not canonized, like our Queen Esther, to be deemed completely perfect in holiness, and she can be referred to as a saint in Catholicism. So the crypto Jews took advantage of this loophole, and they continued celebrating Purim, as mentioned, as the festival of their Saint Esther. Now, these two works that you see here on the screen are a collection of poems and a broadside sonnet, which are examples of the crypto-Jewish commemoration of Saint Esther in Turin, Italy, in the 18th century. Now, descendants of the Arussy continue, like we said, to practice. And if we're talking about the 18th century, that's already getting closer to nowadays. It means that it wasn't just from the 15th century when they had to convert, but they kept this tradition of Esther, her holiness, but essentially her story.
And one of the things also about the crypto Jews is that there are a lot of people named Esther in the community. There is this connection. It's the way they have some biblical names as well, but Esther is a very prominent name there, as that's one of the connections. And I'm not sure if you mentioned, but there are some that actually hold a 3-day fast, because that's what was originally there. So sorry, I was trying to play the music. We'll go on now to the source of Purim. Right? Where did it come from? It came from the Persian Empire. That's where Mordechai and Esther presumably had lived. And it's very personal connection to many of the Persian Jews. And if you listen and look at any of the background of the people from there, even Shaheen, who is the poet of Jewish Persia, if you look at his poem about, it's not, I don't know, it's a epic poem, it's 1,000 verses or something, so it's hard to call it a poem. But if you look at his poem about Megillat Esther, about the scroll of Esther, you'll see how personal he makes it. There are things where it almost sounds like he's talking about his own story, and you also see that a lot through the Persian Jewish connections. One of them being the pilgrimage to Hamadan, which tradition holds that is the burial ground of Mordechai and Esther. And actually, I don't know if it still is true, but when it was built about 30 years ago, the building itself houses the largest Magen David, the largest star of Israel in the world, Star of David, sorry, in the world. You can't see it from this angle, but if you look at our video on our website, you can see that it's a huge one there. And it's actually a site that is visited by Muslims as well as Jews. And other communities would come there. It became a pilgrimage site for everybody in Hamadan. Now, you can see going back at least 3 centuries that there were people that would go there for a pilgrimage. So whether or not it's the actual site, it's the site that has been incorporated as the burial ground for Mordechai and Esther.
I'm just going to interrupt to say why Hamadan. We don't see that city in the scroll of Esther. It is believed that that was where the kingly summer home was. So it's assumed that they went there and passed away there. I don't know about the Star of David because I know that there has been damage done to it, but it was when it was refurbished 50 years ago, it was refurbished as part of the greater celebration of the Persian Empire with the Shah. So it was part of a celebration of saying our Persian Empire includes the Jews, and this is the part of our greater history. So its refurbishment really has significance in not just the Jews' connection to the Persian Jews' connection to the story of Esther, but really the greater Iranian, greater Persian story, connection to this story.
Particularly with the Shah, because the Shah was trying to show his place as a continuation of the Persian Empire. So thank you for putting that in there as well. And Iranians would also continue or Persians would also continue the tradition of vegetarian meals, particular meals like ashi, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong because I don't have any Persian, but ashi reshtahan, I believe, halva and gushifal, which is the elephant's ears, but for Purim, considered Haman's ears, as we were talking about before. It's also eaten for Nowruz. So those who know, Nowruz is the Persian New Year, which actually came from the Zoroastrian New Year, and it kind of got a little incorporated into Purim as well because they fall out right around the same time. So it's actually a very patriotic is the wrong word because it's not for Iran, but it's for the Persian history. It's celebrated by Iranians, Afghans, Azeris, Kurds, and it's continued in the communities outside. So some of the same foods that we have for Purim are also eaten. It's also for the spring. They're also eaten for Nowruz. So you also have the koluche, which is the date and walnut filled cookies. So these are not necessarily foods that everyone has, but you can see that there are the similarities between them.
And then we're going to move to Yemen. And in Yemen, they would really try to prepare a feast like King Achashverosh in the story of Esther held. They would start preparing wine from Rosh Chodesh Adar, so that's essentially 2 weeks before, to make sure there was enough to look like it was really a king's feast. And a week before, stores would be filled with sweets like dates and raisins and such, and all kinds of animals and vessels to make special cookies for Purim. And on the evening of Purim, they would bake cakes and cookies for mishloach manot and presents. And really, we're talking about elaboration. They were trying to be as elaborate as the feast in the story. And they would also engage the children in different ways, including the effigies, as we previously mentioned. The children themselves would be handing out the mishloach manot, so they would be filling the streets and giving them to their neighbors. And there were always gifts for children and the poor, and there's still gifts to this day to the children, for Yemenite children. I can tell you that. And something that we haven't seen yet, and maybe we didn't mention, is that during the reading of the scroll of Esther on Purim, it's customary in many, many, many communities to make noise when you hear the name of Haman, but as a way of like disgracing him. But Haman being the antagonist of the story. But in Yemen, and we'll see in another community later, they didn't make noise for Haman, because as much as you wanted to disgrace, that's what they had the effigies for. They didn't want to disturb the holiness of the synagogue where the scroll was being read, so they did not make noise. And then there's a piyut called Smach Lodi, which we can show you a piece of, play a piece of for you. But essentially, what it's saying is there's an equivalent called Shoshanat Yaakov that a lot of communities sing, and it's about your heart being glad, singing, and all that. And then Smach Lodi is a little bit different, where it talks about, may God avenge you today of your enemies, and may you beat on the strings. May joy and also feast and a good day with old wine. And it kind of has a different vibe that starts with vengeance. And if we can, I don't know if we can play it.
Mm-hmm. While I'm opening it, I just want to say that one of the interesting things, if you look at also the Pesach story as an addition to the Haggadah in the Yemenite community, Machabal, it also starts with vengeance and God saving the people. So there's an interesting part there. Now we have to make sure that you can hear it. Tell me if you can hear it. No?
No.
Yes? No. Okay, so while I'm going to open it and try to share again, sorry. There, I got it. I just want to mention that I like this version of it because it's actually a few different communities coming together to sing this Smach Lodi. So I thought that was kind of along the lines of what we're talking about here. So,
ליהודים. בוא נקרא לבועז ואביעד, יהודים לעשות שמח לכולם. פורים שמח.
So that's a little taste. It's, I think it's kind of fun. So let's go back to where we were. Okay, what's also interesting sorry, continue.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that there was a city in Yemen that actually they would keep the second day. For those who don't know, there were 2 days of Purim, right? The first day is the one that most of us keep, and the second one are those that were in walled cities, that are living in walled cities from the time of Joshua, from the time of Yoshua. So most of us know it from Jerusalem, if we know it, right? There's Shushan Purim in Jerusalem, but there was also a city in Yemen called Brash that they would read the Megillah on the 15th because they knew that they had the palace walls of the city that were there from the time of Yoshua bin Nun. So some of these cross-cultural things. Okay. You want to keep going with Syria? And
Yeah, so in Syria, so one of the common practices that we mentioned was giving machatzit shekel, and they would start doing so from Rosh Chodesh Adar. It's essentially a silver coin that would be the equivalent of half of a shekel, not today's shekel, but there would be a registry where everyone had to give, and they were kept in a kupa that would in a box in a fund that would be given to Jerusalem for the Jews living in Jerusalem, because Jews had been living in Jerusalem throughout the centuries. And actually, as we mentioned with Haman, the tradition of making noise, banging, whatever it is to disgrace him. So in Syria, Zachor, which is the Shabbat that we mentioned before Purim, men would bang quietly with their feet and their hands when Amalek was mentioned. Amalek is considered to be the forefather of Haman, and it would be quietly because still everyone is supposed to be, according to tradition, listening to every word of those verses. And then what some of the things we mentioned, special foods, they didn't necessarily have foods that relate to Haman's ears, but they do have special foods, one of them being baklava graibe, a soft buttered dough made in the shape of a bagel with a pistachio nut on top. And also ajwe, a paste made of mashed dates covered with a delicious semolina dough, rolled paper thin and then shaped as a crescent, as you can see in the picture. And these were sent with an orange, a bottle of wine, a variety of candies like sesame candies, halva, etc. So those were the shloach manot that they would hand out to their family, their friends, their neighbors. And as with the Yemenite Jews, the children were rewarded with money for delivery, and they would receive also baked goods and sweets. And some of like we heard the sounds of Yemen, now we can hear some of the sounds of Syria.
like Dalya just said, there are specific piyutim that were sung by the Syrian community, also by some others, but they're known for the Syrian community. So we found you some samples here to listen and kind of get used to the tone of it, the sound of it. So this one is called Elose Nekama, so God takes revenge, as we were talking about before with the Yemenites, who also talk about God taking revenge and taking power.
מפוזר ומפורד בין עמה גזר יזידים להשמיד היהודים כי בו הם בוגדים לא פחד ואימה
Okay, you kind of hear it, and it's somewhat upbeat, even if you listen to it. You know, God's taking revenge, but this is a good thing. And this is when Yom HaNisim VaPulkan, the Day of Miracles. Again, we'll just hear a little tidbit so we get used to it.
بابكن كان إلى حين عحز حش فيروس وكان شلوم لانو يفروس.
Now, some of it's also voice, but some of it's also the different tunes. Let's try one more. So this is Avarech et Shem Hashem, that I'll bless the name of God, also for Purim.
أبارك أدوناي شريعة ثاني أفللو تفللو تسروني خليوتاي أبارك شريعة أدوناي بحبا
And this one, for those of you who know, sounds a little more traditional in terms of the sounds and the repetitions. And of course, things evolve over time, but the beauty is that these themes and these threads continue to go through. So let me go back to our PowerPoint here. Okay, so one of the things that we have in one of our videos as well, for those who don't know, we have educational video clips as part of Jewish Unity Through Diversity, and one of them is about Buena Sarfati. And that's really where, I don't know about you, Dalya, but that's where I learned about what a compla is. And she would write them and talk about them, and it's really a song that was sung among Ladino-speaking Jews. And there are special ones created for Purim. And so that's something that's very much a personal, if we talk about Persian Jews taking this as a personal holiday and their direct connection to it, the komplas make it personal to the Ottoman Sephardim or the Ladino-speaking Sephardim. So one of the things we're looking at is the different foods, and they call Shabbat Zachor, which we were talking about before. Shabbat Zachor, the remembering the Amalek, the people who we were supposed to wipe out and we didn't wipe out, and they're the ones that keep coming back to try and kill the Jews. And if you look through history, and we can have a whole class about Amalek and whether it's a real thing or a metaphoric, but Shabbat Zachor is remembering Amalek, remembering those who try to wipe us out. But the women in many of these communities, not all of them, would call it Shabbat de Bularis. Bularis meaning gift or present. And they would take pastry, cover a hard-boiled egg, place it in the base, and then the thin strips of dough were placed over the egg in a crisscross section, which connected to the base. And maybe it represents Haman's leg, some people said, or foot, or maybe it's symbolic of his hanging, that it's hanging off of there. Sometimes there are some dishes that were tweaked to be also in the shape of an ear. But you see there are these special foods and these special creations. And if those, again, if we have these cross-cultural things, eggs, Purim, getting close, a month before Easter kind of thing, they're cross-cultural within Judaism and cross-cultural beyond Judaism that we've found in many places. So I'm going to let Dalya introduce this so I can open it.
So this is one of the komplas that was found. Complas were a type of poem, and some of them would be off the cuff, some of them would be written down. There are many complas for Purim. This is one specific one, and it begins something like, I wish to recount the deeds of the God Almighty. I wish to describe nothing will be left out, with dancing and jumping and with great pleasure, because Haman, the bastard, the illegitimate one, he wanted to kill us and also to terrify us. Now, this text, the original text, now the translated text, is found both in Istanbul and in Livorno. There were two different translations in each of them. So I'll explain the quote on the side that says, if you are in Istanbul. So in the first one, in the one from Istanbul that was published, the translation says that with dancing and jumping and with great pleasure we celebrate. Whereas in Italy, it was translated to be laughing and singing. So there was this sort of concept of, in each place you celebrate a little bit differently, and this just shows also a general form of expression of the Ladino-speaking, the Judeo-Spanish-speaking Jews throughout the Ottoman Empire.
Empezar quiero contar hechos del Dios alto, de lo que quiero mentar, nada yo no falto, con riso y canto, y con gran placer, porque aman el mamzer, mosquillo matarmos, también atemarmos, en Shabbat, en Shabbat, lo colgaron, al jalón enterraron, oíd lo que aconteció.
Going back and forth between these. Okay, so we're going to move across to Morocco. Again, we're giving you tidbits. We'd love if you share. We're going to give you some time also to share. So first of all, we know that those who are not in the walled cities from the time of Joshua had, straight from the fast, you go read Megillah, and then you have to eat. So in Morocco, there was actually special food. Many don't make a feast because you have to have a feast the next day. But in Morocco, they would specifically have specific foods for this break-fast meal after Megillah reading. And it was often a hen and couscous. And people have said maybe it was to show that Purim was brought about by a woman. So you have a hen. I kind of like that, so we're adding it in. And in Morocco, there's lots of noise for Haman during Megillah reading. If we talk about the Spanish Portuguese, that has to be silent. We talk about the Yemenites, that it has to be silent. There's lots of noise. And then even when you say Haman, then afterwards, and again, it's not in all the communities across Morocco. There were many communities. We're taking tidbits. So I encourage you to tell us if there was a place that, I'm sure there were places that this wasn't the case. But after, when the person reading the Megillah would say Haman, then they would all also say Arura Zeresh and Vashti. Zeresh, the wife of Haman, and Vashti, the previous wife of Ahasuerus, should be killed. And they would also bake little cakes and breads in different forms. Some maybe like ladders, because Purim was a time of ascent for the Jews and descent for Haman. Some made in the shape of birds, based on the verse from Isaiah, Ketziporim afot ken yagen Hashem tzvakot al Yerushalayim, like flying birds, so should God protect Jerusalem, meaning the Jewish people. And some would bake in the shape of a cat's paw, because it was said that Rabbeinu Chai said, he who sees a cat will be given new clothes. If he was ordained to die, he will be saved from death. Some made the bread into the shape of men to depict Haman or Mordechai, and sometimes with slices of egg to look like eyes in those. Another beautiful thing, and we always try to bring in something unique to the women. In many communities across Morocco, the women would wake up early, specifically on Purim, and brush each other's hair, because they wanted to parallel what Esther would wake up in the morning and have her hair combed by somebody else, obviously, because she's the queen. And so it could be, and again, these are all us interpreting what we know as the custom, but we're putting in the ones that we liked, that have some basis in it. So maybe it's based on Yoma, page 29a, that Esther was compared to Ayelet HaShachar, the dawn of Psalm 22. So dawn, waking up early, combing each other's hair. Either way, I think it's a beautiful thing. And also the Purim Suda itself, the feast, is known in many communities in Morocco as Santa Esterica, the one that we had after Mincha.
And then we come to the last community that we're going to cover. Obviously, there are many communities, but we're going to talk about the Spanish Portuguese, mainly that there was a strong tradition of elaborations of the parchment with decorative motifs and pictures, and even the cases of the Megillot. It's not necessarily unique to them, but it's a strong tradition to the Spanish Portuguese. And like we mentioned with Yemen, they also kept decorum in the synagogue and did not make noise during Haman's name in the reading of the scroll of Esther. And we're going to listen to a piece by Cantor Daniel Chalfon on how the Megillah is read.
In a minute. Sorry. Stop share. Got it. We're getting this. I'm just, where is it?
ישם את כיסאו מעל כל השרים אשר איתו וכל רבי המלך אשר בשער המלך קוראים ומשתחווים להמן כי כן ציווה לו המלך ומרדכי לא יקרא ולא ישתחווה ויאמרו עבדי המלך אשר בשער המלך למרדכי מדוע אתה עובר את מצוות המלך ויהי כאומרם אליו.
So in general, I recommend, if you want specifically Spanish, Portuguese tunes, to find Daniel Chalfon on YouTube. He has a lot recorded there, and it's really quite beautiful for every holiday, for every occasion. He's recorded a lot of their tunes, just a side.
And I do want to just make a note, because I do want to get to the questions and discussion, because I think some of you out there may know some things that we should all be sharing. But I do want to at least mention that there is such a thing called Purim Sheni in many different communities. And so Purim kind of became the symbol of saving the Jewish peoples. So in many communities around the world, when there was a redemption from a local danger or a natural disaster, or delivering even of one family, so it became known as Purim Sheni. So that's a whole nother class at this point, whole nother discussion, but I just at least wanted to introduce that there are across many different communities. So those, I'm just quickly showing you. And like I was saying before, much more information can be found. Dalya's great at updating on social media. So there are plenty of information there on all types of different communities, but we usually focus on one community in those. Hopefully we gave you kind of a survey overarching. There were definitely some questions and comments, and so we're going to go there. So we were asked about costumes. So we do know that in the Persian community, it was the children that dressed up, not the adults. And if there anybody else who can share with us what they do in their communities in terms of costumes, you can open your your microphone also, if that helps.
I just want to say that in Italy, like Venice is very famous for the carnival and the masking. And there is a big question of what the Jews of Venice centuries ago, like would celebrate. They also had on Purim, they had a carnival. What came first? Like which one borrowed from who? It's a very fascinating, discussion. And the masks also, in terms of the who created them. And Venice is very famous for all of its masks. So that's number one. I wrote in the notes there that Dutch Jews also they take pancake batter, and they dip it into the frying pan, and now the Dutch Jews were originally Sephardim. And
many of them. There were also large Ashkenazi communities.
But the first ones were the Sephardim,
yes,
right? And it's just interesting to see, because it's how customs can become crossover into Ashkenazi and into who told me about this? A very Ashkenazi Dutch lady, Then I wanted to just, and I'm sorry, I have to leave in a few minutes, but I wrote a story which never came out, on Santa Esterica, years ago. And I was looking for the image that I had discovered then. Okay. And you see, she's got a pomegranate. Her scepter is a pomegranate. Here they've added Hadassim because her name was Hadassah. And I remember then that the image I saw then, she was holding a rope in one hand with a noose. So they had all sorts of, subtle hints about it. It's really the Santa Esterica is a fascinating story of identity.
Yeah,
of
definitely.
Hiding your identity,
But clinging to it as well.
Yes.
It's hiding it, but clinging to it.
Yes. And also, how many of these crypto Jews, these traditions are handed down without any explanations, because by now, who knows? They can't figure it out. So thank you very much. It was really fascinating.
Thank you. I'm glad you came. So Sarah's asking where we got the information from. So some of it is just interviewing people and speaking to people. Some of it is Mori Kapach's book about Yemen. So much of the information about Yemen came from there. Some of it is from a treasury of Sephardic laws and customs by Dobritsky. And others research across the web is a lot of it. People writing like Dalya said, Ronit Treatman wrote, and I know some of it from the crypto Jews, particularly from Jeannie Milgram. So they're out there. It's not necessarily combined there. So you can feel free to ask. I'm going to look through if there's one or two more questions. Oh, the 3-day fast, as far as we know, was 24 hours. I'm assuming they must have had some drink in there, although there's nobody there to tell us because it was a secret community. So there isn't much that it's hard to know details, and you can't say that it's whole communities that did it because they had to hide from each other. So in terms of mishloach manot, that's an interesting question about the fruits and drink. And so if you go back to the Gemara or the Talmud, you'll see that they discuss giving meat as mishloach manot. And so you're talking about that in Iraq, meat and wine. And Dalya was talking before about oranges as part of some of the communities. So I think, everybody would incorporate what was available to them and what was a little bit of a special treat to them. So it wasn't necessarily only sweets. And no, unfortunately, I couldn't find any good images of most of these traditions. I was looking for the effigies, and if anybody finds them and you can send them to us, we'd love to incorporate it, because it's something unique, and I don't think it's done too much now. I know that in Yemen, for example, just because that's my research base, that they were doing it in secret. They were destroying the effigies in secret for quite a while until Imam Yahya, who they felt a little emboldened to do it. And that was maybe 5 years that they actually did it in public, and then they left. So it didn't, as far as I know, it didn't continue to any of the Yemenite diasporas around the world. I haven't heard of anybody doing it, let's put it that way, and we are in touch. So is there any other questions or comments before we sign off? Because I really appreciated this. Okay, we do encourage you to send us more, because that's the way we learn. Like Sarah asked, how do we get these? We get them from sharing. We get them from understanding each other's traditions and from sharing. And so we encourage you to share yours and incorporate somebody else's. So have a wonderful Purim. Wishing you a Purim Sameach. And thank you for coming.